West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Again, nobody was hurt, but this was an active threat, another one, in the United States Capitol, and it comes just 2 weeks after the Department of Homeland Security sent an alert to law enforcement agencies all over the country, warning of an increased threat of politically motivated violence this month, specifically tied to rampant pro-Trump conspiracy theories around the election and this fantasy among pro-Trump extremists that former President Trump will somehow be reinstated as president this month. And that is part of what this guy was ranting and raving about today when he was threatening that he could blow up 2.5 square blocks of Washington, D.C. Is this the kind of violence we were warned about? And should we see this as linked to broader threats? Or should we see these things as random, sad lunatics who should be treated as individuals and not as part of some larger ideologically motivated thing? Joining us now is Ben Collins. He's a senior reporter for NBC News. He specifically covers disinformation and extremism, which means Ben's daily beat is pretty dark. But Ben, this was a different kind of dark. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
I specifically wanted to talk to you tonight because when we started, when this ended today, when we knew it wasn't going to be a bomb story, it was going to be a bomb threat story, and we started to learn more about what this guy was apparently motivated by, I found myself wanting to ask you if it's a good idea to report on what motivated this guy, whether we should report on what was in his live stream, whether we should report on what he thought he was doing, or whether that has the potential to make this worse.
It's a double-edged sword. I think, posting all 5 or 6 Facebook Live videos that he streamed that were just ramblings for a lot of the time, I think that's kind of useless. I don't think that really helps anybody. But I do think there is something here. This guy was complaining, the one through line was that, his life was in shambles because he didn't have health care, and that his wife needed a surgery and could not get it. And then by the time she got it, it seemed to disfigure her in some way, and he was still paying for it. And then, at the end of that, we would think like, hey, this guy should care about healthcare, right? He cares about healthcare, right? Whatever. But that's not what happened. And then very next sentence, he said, now we see all of these Afghan immigrants. We call them illegal immigrants from Mexico and Afghanistan. And they're going to get the free stuff that we don't have, free healthcare. And what I realized is this is just going to keep happening. There is this sort of fascist authoritarian element that pinpoints immigrants as the cause of all these problems. This is not a new concept, but the idea that as things get worse and worse and erode due to the pandemic or climate change, this is just going to keep happening. The problems are not going to get solved, but they're going to be pinned on people who are not from this country. Do
you think that this was a Was this a modern event in the sense that, do you think that this is, like you said, these are not new tropes, these ideas of scapegoating immigrants and blaming the other, particularly the other of another color, for what is definitely a homegrown problem and putting the anxiety on the external rather than on the internal? Those aren't new ideas, but the way that he was talking about his grievances, I'm thinking about the DHS threat to alert to law enforcement agencies a couple of weeks ago. The theory behind that is that there's something more virulent and more potentially motivating to people who are inclined to commit political violence, to have stuff like this channeled through disinformation channels, through social media, and through extremist media in a way that sort of validates and encourages people who think this way.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that the forums that were there before January 6th that were posting all this stuff, they're still around. They're still posting crazy stuff. In fact, there was, I would say, like a 5 or 6 month cooling off period where people didn't really know if they were being watched by the feds. They didn't know how explicitly to talk about stuff. But in the last couple of weeks, as first of all, they realized, these people in these forums realized that Donald Trump is not going to be the president again anytime soon. And second of all of these audits are not this cut and dry case of election fraud that they thought it was. In fact, it's probably a sham. That's what they're starting to realize, that, people have to, I guess, take up arms. That's what they keep saying in this space. Like, when are you going to do something? That's what everyone keeps saying in these spaces. I guess the difference is there's no date. January 6th, there was this 2-week lead up. It was like a WrestleMania for these people. They were just waiting to go. Now everyone's just like, where do we go? What do we do? And that's how you get lone wolf terror. I do want to say really quickly, there were 2 QAnon terror attacks last week. There were, a guy killed his kids and ascribed it to QAnon. And there was the largest mass shooting in the UK in decades. And that guy was an incel Trump supporter who believed himself to be an American at heart. And he viewed that to be like gun-toting and believing in QAnon. And there's this idea that the government is filled with pedophiles or something. So lone wolf terror is something to be worried about here, in part because there is no organizing event that these people can meet up. And, maybe those things would diffuse these things, but if they're lone wolves, they can do it themselves.
It is Friday, the 20th of August of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all night hawks in the diner of life, indeed. Now, one might discern that it being Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, and we feature the French 77 cocktail prominently and such, that you would think this is only a liquid diet of the spirited kind, but no. Rest assured, there is edible sustenance as well, indeed. Okay, yeah, we might be sort of like a French salon, but we have some of that German Gestalt going on too. Yes, we do. Alrighty, so there was a bomb threat by a bomber, alleged, in D.C. yesterday. And Politico today decided that Obama's party from 2 weeks ago was much more important, because apparently the criticism of Obama's party has really put a damper on the party circuit out there in the Eastern Seaboard. And Political's right on top of it to report the important news of the day. Yeah, forget about this guy trying to blow up the Library of Congress, or at least saying he could. Now, am I alone in this assessment? Because when I first heard of this yesterday, in fact, it might have even been during the show, but I had a curated part that we're supposed to focus in on. Don't take in new stimuli. Get the job at hand done, then take in the new stimuli. I had noted that the first reports I saw were that the police were negotiating with a bomber. And am I alone in this when I thought the bomber's got to be white? Because think of it. You think about Philando Castile, who told the cop when they stopped the car, he's in the passenger seat. He's got his kid in the back seat. His significant other is driving. Cop pulls him over, I think for a tail light. You know, that old saw that the cops like to use to pull over people. And Docile Castile said, I am a legal gun owner. And yeah, I have a gun. And the cop shot him dead right then. So here you have a guy in a truck on the sidewalk in front of the Library of Congress saying, I've got a bomb. I'm going to blow up 2 whole blocks. Don't come any closer. And they just negotiated with the guy. Holy hell. Yeah. It's only explained if you turn off the color TV and just look at things in black and white, and it becomes very clear. It's the lighting. It's how they light the scene. Yeah. So, apparently, I guess the guy didn't have the tanamite. Is that what it's called? Tannermite? The explosive that you can explode just by shooting it. So maybe that's why the cops didn't shoot him. I don't know. I thought they all were like military trained and snipers. Well, now I don't want to make or I don't want to disrespect our military, but I think marksmanship in our military is not really taught. They just give them a bunch of bullets and say, fill this area with lead, and you fill this area with lead. Something's got to hit something. And that's what we do. There's no marksmanship. No. You can't support a military-industrial complex if you're able to take out your enemy with one bullet. Okay? You need lots. So, maybe the cops thought, I'm military trained. There's no way I'm going to shoot that stuff. It'll blow up as soon as I hit it. Because they fill the area with lead. All right. So maybe that explained it. But it's still an issue of black and white. Docile Castile tells the cop, I am a legal gun owner, and he is shot dead within seconds. With his kid in the back seat. And this guy's ranting and raving. I mean, people called it in. It wasn't like security came down the steps of the Library of Congress and the Supreme Court. People on the sidewalk saying, hey, there's some sort of really weird Southern guy in a monster truck whining about his finances. Sell the truck. Jesus. And the fairings, those aren't cheap either. You know, they got these, like, skinny tires and the weird fairings around the hubcap, around the fenders and stuff. Come on. They don't have money. Maybe they're leveraged up to the hilt, and that's why they're all worried now. Well, I would be too. That's why I try not to leverage like that. Monster truck. Black, too. You know. Saying, we're bringing the South to D.C. I hate to tell you, buddy. The South lost the war. And D.C. is considered in some quarters to be part of the South anyway. So shut up. All right. I guess we're headed for a lovely weekend now, aren't we? Yes, we are. At least there's some baseball tonight. At least the team that I follow, San Francisco Giants. And, yeah, they had an off day yesterday. Some people don't like baseball, and I can understand why. When I was younger, I kind of hated baseball, probably because it was also during track season. And, I looked at the Olympics as being something attainable, like every kid does. I also thought that playing pro football was attainable until I got crushed a few times in college and realized, what the hell am I thinking? Yeah, what the hell? But I wasn't too bad in track. I thought that I might want to aspire to be a decathlete. But it was a pretty good pole vaulter and a pretty good 400-meter guy. Also ran the 400-meter high hurdles. It was pretty good times for the time. And for a high schooler. And, you know, some high schoolers did pretty well, and I competed against them and did pretty well. But I didn't really look at baseball as being, well, in any sort of positive way until I stopped being a competitor in sports, and I then appreciated the pastoral beauty of baseball. That it took as long as it took. There was no time clock on it. 9 innings. Or more if you had a tie, you know. And it just took as long as it took. Sometimes it only took an hour and a half. Sometimes it might be bumping 4. It's lovely. It's a pastoral game. And some people hate that. So now we have the DH. In extra innings, they have this stupid runner on second. I hate that. Just, play the game the way it's been played, because there's all these statistics attached from the time the game began. So, I never appreciated baseball when I was, an athlete, because it was during track. And I like track. Though there was one fellow, a great athlete at my high school, Tony Madu, who went on to, at least try out for the Chicago Bears. He and Dwight Stones, the high jumper, Olympic high jumper, I believe Stones at one time held the world record for a bit. I was competing in the pole vault at a state meet, a state final, and both he and Dwight Stones and our guy, Tony Madu, were the first 2 high schoolers to clear 7 feet in a meet. And I thought that was heady stuff. So, but the story about Tony Madu is that he was also a great baseball player. This guy was one of the great athletes that I've ever been around. And that's attested to by a lot of people who knew him. He went on to, play for, I believe, up in Reno, that area, the school up there. What is that school? Anyway, he coached there for considerable time and passed a year or 2 years ago. Anyway, he was a great baseball player, and he would play baseball. We would have track meets at whatever school that we were at. There would also be the baseball game, and he would run from the baseball diamond over to the track, take a jump in the high jump. And usually he only had to take a couple because he was that good. And continue playing the baseball game. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. That was tough. I did play baseball and then run over and then try to take a jump in the pole vault. I don't think so. But Tony Madu could do it. So, baseball season is coming up. Baseball season is coming to a close because they're already talking about wild card berths. Well, my team, San Francisco Giants, are still doing pretty good. Anything can happen. There's still a lot of the season left. And I'm not quite ready for football yet. Preseason and football kind of pisses me off. It just does. So enough of that petty, trivial concerns. We have a world collapsing around us. Damn. I don't think we're going to be playing baseball in a wildfire. So pastoral. Yeah, it is pastoral. Where'd the pasture go? Well, we had to burn down this forest to get it. That's one way to look at it. Okay, baseball diamonds everywhere a national forest was. Alrighty, well, let's get into the curated part of the show, because we do curate a show here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and all that stuff that happened in D.C. with that bomber is just another example of how the collapse of pro-Trump conspiracy theories raises domestic terror concerns. Now, the FBI came out today and said, there was no coordinated or no coordination among these disparate groups to come and overthrow the United States government. In spite of the fact they had T-shirts and a gallows. No planning. No planning. I think what they're trying to say, or they being Ray, wasn't he appointed by Trump? Yes, he was. I think what they're trying to get at is that Roger Stone and whoever else said to those disparate groups, do what you got to do. But they didn't really take part in it. Looks like another one of those lone wolf synchronicity jabs. Somehow all these lone wolves know what to do at the same time. Crazy. All right. Well, we'll find out more about that on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Across the political spectrum, more Americans are worried about domestic terrorism than of foreign threats. A federal judge in Nevada ruled that the felony deportation law is unconstitutional, and U.S. states rush to meet the deadline to join the $26 billion opioid settlement. And after the break, we then move to the chef's table, where Australian mining company BHP Group has fired 48 workers for sexual harassment since 2019. And unidentified commandos shot a Mexican radio journalist dead outside his home in the Gulf Coast state of Veracruz. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left, across the page, to the left near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com from the chat room link is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really helps us a lot. Though we dig into our own wallets to keep this powerhouse of resistance resisting, we would be unable to do it without you. If you could afford, how about an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance? And if you could afford to send those funds our way, we stretch those dollars along with the dollars that we've stretched out of our own wallets beyond compare, even on the quantum level. And truly, and then we're able to pay our bills, fly under the radar, because that technology is still used, and continue this powerhouse of resistance against the hostile takeover of the United States of America, as the founders originally intended, so many years ago. All kidding aside, thank you for your generosity to those of you who have been so generous to us, for these last 10 years, and also a preemptive thanks to those of you who hopefully, in our case, will be generous in the future. Yes. Okay. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other platforms in the social medias sphere that you know who they are. Yes, Zuckerberg. Anyway, do that, and you can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and most importantly, pick up podcasts, please, by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay. So much other news out in the world just trying to intrude upon us, but we have a curated show, and that's what we're going to do. This first offering is by Matt Cohen from the American Independent as we begin here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. More Americans are worried about threats from domestic extremist groups than foreign ones, according to a recent poll conducted by the Associated Press and NORC at the University of Chicago. The poll, which was released yesterday morning, Thursday, found that 65% of respondents said they are extremely worried about threats from domestic extremist groups. 75% of Democratic respondents said they are very worried about domestic extremism threats, while 57% of Republicans and 55% of independents also said they were very worried about threats posed by those groups. But just 50% of overall respondents said they were worried about threats from extremist groups outside the U.S. 49% of Democrats, 54% of Republicans, and 41% of independents. There was a steep increase in violence from far-right extremist groups during the Trump administration. The number of incidents peaked in 2020 to the highest levels since the data was first collected in 1994, according to an analysis of data from the Washington Post. The Post found that the rise in far-right extremism was mostly driven by, wait for it, white supremacists, as well as anti-Muslim and anti-government extremist groups. White. Nearly 600 individuals have been charged for their involvement in the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. I call it an insurrection, but you know who's quibbling. Led by far-right extremists and supporters of Donald Trump, and experts warn that actions taken by the FBI and law enforcement to hold individuals accountable are not the end of far-right extremism violence. They say it could get even worse, especially with a Democrat in the White House. Of course, just as they planned it. So what I'd like to know is, why are the leaders and organizers of this, and why are the profiteers making money and political hay off of this? Why are they not held to account? It will continue unless, you go for the head. Daryl Johnson, the former lead analyst for domestic terrorism at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, told the American Independent Foundation it's under Democratic administrations where these groups proliferate. So for at least the next 4 years, we're still going to see a period of heightened activity. Oh, you mean like a bunch of Timothy McVeighs? That's something to look forward to. In early August, a leaked Department of Homeland Security document warned of a modest but increasing threat of violence from people and groups who believe the 2020 election conspiracy theories. Meaning, Trump won. Yeah, that conspiracy theory. And in recent weeks, popular extremist and white supremacist channels on encrypted social media apps, including Telegram, have been exploiting 2020 election conspiracy theories, anti-government sentiment over coronavirus vaccine and mask mandates, the 2020 census data, white people are in decline, and most recently, the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan in order to recruit new people into their ranks. Now, messages also showed people praising the Taliban, in particular, how they were able to take over Afghanistan so quickly. According to BuzzFeed News, one influential far-right vlogger with ties to a violent neo-Nazi group wrote, "The Taliban is epic. The U.S. had to invade in the early 2000s and stay over 20 years, spending $1 trillion and dozens of American lives, to hold them back. As soon as we left, the Taliban took over the whole country in like 12 hours, LMAO. Now, Samil Kamili, an extremism researcher and scholar, told BuzzFeed News that the political backlash over the withdrawal of U.S. troops in Afghanistan has been leveraged by white nationalists to support their claim of illegitimacy and ineptitude of the Biden administration, as well as calls to reinstate Donald Trump as president. She worries that this rhetoric could be used as a recruitment tool for extremist groups. And just yesterday afternoon, law enforcement arrested a man in D.C. who barricaded himself in a truck parked outside the Library of Congress, claiming he had a bomb. The man, who was identified by police as Floyd Ray Roseberry — there's always three names for these people — posted videos of himself to Facebook railing against President Joe Biden and Democrats, while threatening to blow himself up to start a revolution. Ken Ritter of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. In a court ruling with potentially broad implications for U.S. immigration cases, a federal judge in Nevada found that a criminal law that dates to 1929 and makes it a felony for a person who has been deported to return to the United States is unconstitutional. U.S. District Judge Miranda Dew in Reno, in an order issued on Wednesday, found the law widely known as Section 1326 is based on, quote, racist nativist roots, end quote, and discriminates against Mexican and Latinx people in violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the Fifth Amendment. Anybody who works in federal courts knows the statute. Franny Frostman, retired long-time chief of the Federal Public Defender's Office in Nevada, said, there really are a large number of cases that have been brought over the years under that section. They're mostly public defender cases. Section 1326 of the Immigration and Nationality Act makes it a crime for a person to enter the U.S. if they have been denied admission, deported, or removed. It was enacted in 1952 using language from the Undesirable Aliens Act, passed by Congress in 1929. Penalties were stiffened 5 times between 1988 and 1996 to increase its deterrent value. Frostman said she expected the government will appeal to the Ninth Circuit of Appeals in San Francisco, but Julian Castro, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development in the Obama administration, said that he doubted the Justice Department would want to defend a law with an incredibly racist history. Acting U.S. Attorney Christopher Chiao and an aide did not immediately respond to messages about the ruling. Frostman called Dew's order groundbreaking for its thoroughness. Dew, a Vietnamese immigrant, was nominated to the federal bench by President Barack Obama and sworn in 2012. I think it will have implications because it's going to be difficult to get around her reasoning, Frostman said of the court order. It's a little hard to get around a statute that was called the Wetback Act by the people enacting it. The derogatory term often refers to Mexican migrants who have entered the country illegally, but it's also used to disparage all Hispanics. Dew said she considered written and oral arguments and expert testimony about the legislative history of the law from Professors Benjamin Gonzalez O'Brien of San Diego State and Kelly Lytle Hernandez of UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles. Importantly, The government does not dispute that Section 1326 bears more heavily on Mexican and Latinx individuals, the judge said in her 43-page order dismissing the June 2020 criminal indictment of Gustavo Carrillo Lopez. Carrillo Lopez was arrested in Nevada in 2019 after having been deported in 1999 and again in 2012, according to prosecutors. His public defender, Lauren Gorman, in Reno, a federal public defender, by the way, did not immediately respond to an email. The judge said she saw no publicly available data about the national origin of people prosecuted under Section 1326, but cited U.S. Border Patrol stats showing that more than 97% of people apprehended at the border in 2000 were of Mexican descent, 86% in 2005, and 87% in 2010. The government argues that the stated impact is a product of geography, not discrimination, and that the statistics are rather a feature of Mexico's proximity to the United States, the history of Mexican employment patterns, and the socio-political and economic factors that drive migration, Du wrote. This court is not persuaded. Brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. U.S. states are racing to meet a deadline to commit to a $26 billion opioid settlement with 3 drug distributors and the drug maker Johnson & Johnson as some grapple with local resistance and concerns the amount is not big enough to address the damage done by an epidemic of addiction. 14 state attorneys general unveiled the proposed settlement with McKesson Corp., AmerisourceBergen Corp., Cardinal Health Inc., and J&J on July 21st, kicking off a months-long process for states, counties, and cities to sign on. By tomorrow, Saturday, states must decide whether to join settlements that call for the distributors to pay $21 billion and Johnson & Johnson to pay $5 billion, money meant to help fund treatment and other services. The epidemic of opioid abuse has resulted in nearly 500,000 overdose deaths since 1999, according to the U.S. government. The settlement's complex formula envisions at least 44 states participating, but ultimately the companies decide whether a critical mass have joined and whether to finalize the deal. Sounds like a good deal if you can get it. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Shattered Lives. Stillwater, the newest movie co-written and directed by Tom McCarthy, has a lot in common with his 2015 offering, Spotlight. Both use real crime stories as source material. The earlier film was based on the Catholic priest sex abuse scandal, and Stillwater is apparently based on the Amanda Knox saga. Both show the lasting impact tragedies can have on those affected. Named for the town in Oklahoma, Stillwater follows the tale of the non-French-speaking Bill, played stoically by Matt Damon, who travels to Marseille, France, to visit his daughter Allison, who is serving time for the murder of her roommate/girlfriend Allison, who claims the real culprit was a man she met at a bar and who stole her keys. She has hope in the form of an appeal when she learns that someone has stepped forward claiming to have met the mystery man and heard him confess to others that he was the culprit. Bill, played seamlessly by the talented Matt Damon, is a good old boy oil rig worker back home and is the classic fish out of water here as he decides to stay in France in the hopes that the new revelation could free his daughter. Rounding out the cast is Camille Cotin as the friendly French neighbor and Abigail Breslin, who plays Allison. This one's strength lies in its performances because at various points, particularly in the third act, some suspension of disbelief is needed to stay with the turn of events. Without spoilers, the film's title is more than just the name of a town from where the main characters hail. It's also a clue that ultimately leaves you with questions about your assumptions. However flawed, Stillwater is worth a watch. It's more drama than thriller that will leave you remembering that often scars don't heal. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Sarah Vitak. Modern medicine and bacterial pathogens are in an arms race. We use antibiotics to keep them at bay, and then they adapt to become immune to those antibiotics, evolving into superbugs. The battle has been an asymmetric one. We just don't have that many options in the fight. Most of our antibiotics come from bacteria, the vast majority from a single genus, Streptomyces. And most antibiotics use the same handful of strategies to attack bacteria. But there's a reason that we only use a tiny fraction of the antibiotic chemicals that exist in nature.
This search for completely new substances was unsuccessful for the past 30 years. It's very difficult to make sure that we find an antibiotic, so a substance that's produced by microorganisms and that's toxic to other microorganisms, but that is not toxic to humans.
Miriam Rosenbaum is a professor of synthetic biotechnology at the Hans Knoll Institute in Germany. But how, if they're so hard to find, do scientists know that we have only found a tiny fraction of the antibiotic substances that exist in nature?
We do know that because for the past 20 years, we were in this biological revolution of sequencing.
Researchers like Rosenbaum have taken that revolution underground, literally, like into the dirt.
And so with these environmental sequencing campaigns, we found out that actually the microbial world is much, much bigger than we thought it is. Now, this is how we know that we only have 5% in the lab, because we see, just looking at the DNA in the soil sample, we see there are 95% more. That where are they? We don't have the cells. Yeah? We can know more than their name or more than their existence there. We see what genes they have.
They don't have the cells because only about 1 to 15% of the species of bacteria in nature can currently be grown in the lab. It's like dusting a room for fingerprints, only to find that the place is totally covered, and in ones that you don't have IDs for, and also that the party's still going all around you, but you can't see the guests. What Rosenbaum can tell from the sequences is that these unseen bacteria do make more and different kinds of antibiotics. So, which bacteria are making them? And is it possible to keep them alive long enough to make the ID? Rosenbaum's answer? Microscopic bacterial pool parties.
Slowly, over a long time, went smaller and smaller, and now we are at these picoliter size droplets, so 200 picoliters. That's way smaller than a milliliter that you can still see or a microliter that you can barely see. It's 1,000,000 times smaller than these microliters. And so these picoliter droplets now are the houses for these microorganisms.
So microscopic water houses.
And we put one cell in one of these droplets. So every cell gets their own house. And then, since these are so small, we can cultivate millions of these small droplets houses in one experiment. And so we take out of one soil sample of a few grams, we get millions of bacterial cells, and we put them all in their individual house. And then we see what grows.
The work was published in the journal eLife. And what they found is that they were able to grow a completely different set of bacteria than what would normally grow using traditional cell culturing techniques.
Typically, we put them either in a shake flask that's like the size of a hand, and then we have a few microbial cells in there that are basically lost in an ocean, or we put them on an agar plate on a solid medium, while in the environment they don't grow in this type of environment.
Giving them their own private space to grow separately also probably helps.
To take them out of the competition, to give them all a chance to actually grow up and to grow without competition and without somebody producing antibiotics and fighting against them and so on.
And the micro water houses are proving to be very flexible incubators. They're tiny, so millions can be grown together in one test tube, and they can be manipulated. So they can be put onto agar plates individually, giving the bacteria a better shot at growing there, or they can be used to do experiments with different conditions inside of each different droplet. But the goal has always been to turn them into tiny antibiotic factories.
So we took all the droplets that had growth in them, and now we added an indicator bacterium that has a light label, a fluorescence label. If these indicator bacteria are able to grow and they're added to the droplet, then we get a light signal, a green or red signal of this droplet.
So red or green light coming from a droplet means the wild bacteria isn't producing antibiotic. Because if it was, that would kill the indicator bacteria in the drop. The color of the light conveniently tells the researchers what type of bacteria is still alive. But a dark droplet, so one without any light coming from it, means that the wild bacteria is killing the indicator bacteria, stopping it from growing and stopping it from producing the light. So it must be producing an antibiotic then.
Yeah, so we can select all the dark droplets and then deposit them. Now we want to get these cultures. We want to get whoever is producing the antibiotic. And now we want to get those out of the droplet.
This means that they can screen millions of bacteria for antibiotic properties pretty quickly and easily. Inside these microscopic bacterial pool parties, humans might just find an upper hand in the arms race against the superbugs. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Sarah Vitak.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Can you help close the racial wealth gap?
I'm Tom Hartman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
Consider these facts. Since 2013, more than 11,000 and counting bank branches have been shuttered across the country, disproportionately in black and brown neighborhoods. Those closings leave those communities at the mercy of predatory payday lenders and check-cashing services. We're talking serious money. Half of black Americans over the course of a working lifetime will lose over $80,000 because of the unavailability of basic banking services. There is a solution. Between 1910 and 1967, the U.S. Post Office offered banking in various forms across the country, including basic bank accounts. That service ended due significantly to the lobbying efforts of the payday lending industry. Postal services in 183 other countries offer these services, and the U.S. Post Office could probably do it too. Remember, the U.S. Postal Service already has a branch in every zip code. Postal banking, a basic bank account with check cashing, can become a reality again. Indeed, the Postal Service Board of Governors is considering just such a pilot program. And you can help by sending the Board of Governors an email in support of this project. Yes, you can help make this country fairer and more just.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because democracy and advocacy begin with you, and freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1964. President Lyndon Baines Johnson gave a mid-morning address in the Rose Garden of the White House. He was there to sign the Economic Opportunity Act that launched what became known as Johnson's War on Poverty. During his speech, the president declared, "On this occasion, the American people and our American system are making history." He said, "We will work through our communities all over the country to develop comprehensive community action programs with remedial education, with job training, with retraining, with health and employment counseling, with neighborhood improvement. We will strike at poverty's roots." The initiative included multiple programs. Among them was a Job Corps to provide basic workplace training to young workers ages 16 to 21. Work-study money was made available for low-income college students. Assistance was provided for agricultural workers and rural families. In 1965, Congress allocated $800 million for the program, but many in Congress opposed the initiative and did all they could to limit its scope and funding. Historians, the press, and the general public have long debated the impact of President Johnson's war on poverty. Many have noted that the funding levels were never high enough for a fully effective jobs training and anti-poverty program. In 1981, Congress repealed the act during the first year of Ronald Reagan's presidency. Fortunately for many families living in poverty, the programs started as a result of President Johnson's war on poverty still remain. The AFL-CIO published an article reflecting on the 50th anniversary of the war on poverty. It called for raising the minimum wage. The article stated, "Clearly, we cannot be serious about ending poverty as long as those who get employment still find themselves below poverty." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of about 82 to 84. Some clouds this morning will give way to generally sunny skies for the afternoon. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. A few passing clouds overnight, lows in the mid-50s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, with partly cloudy skies tomorrow, highs in the low 80s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have increased once again and stand at 159,023, with 2 more confirmed deceased, bringing the total to 179. Grass pollen is rated low in Rogue River proper. The air quality index is rated moderate at 52 parts per million, with an air advisory later on, and the daytime UV index is inching towards fall with a rated high at 7. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.03 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles. And relative humidity is at 92%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 70 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 75 and partly cloudy. Rome is 87 and fair. Kyiv is 77 and fair. Kabul is 76 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 80 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 81 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 61 and also partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 and mostly cloudy. And New York, New York is 80 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Staff at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Sexual harassment is rife at mining camps in Western Australia, with firms across the industry reporting multiple complaints that have led to 48 staff being fired by the world's biggest BHP since 2019, submissions to a government inquiry showed. The inquiry was initiated after high-profile cases of sexual assault by miners, the kind that dig, in the mineral-rich state emerged this year, and as the sector struggles with a dire skills shortage and a low proportion of female staff. I wonder why. Submissions to the investigation were made public this week, including a survey by the Western Mine Workers Alliance, a union representing hundreds of workers in Pilbara, a region rich in the iron ore that is Australia's most valuable export. The survey showed 2/3 of female respondents had experienced verbal sexual harassment while working in the FIFO mining industry, and 36% of women and 10% of men reported some form of harassment in the last 12 months.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more anonymous staff at Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Unidentified assailants shot a Mexican radio journalist dead outside his home in the Gulf Coast state of Veracruz. Jacinto Romero, who wrote about local politics for Oreo Stereo in Orizaba, died following the morning attack in the neighboring municipality. Romero was intercepted by an armed commando when he was driving through town in his vehicle, local media reported. Speaking on condition of anonymity for fear of suffering reprisals, a spokeswoman for the station told Reuters that Romero had received threats for his professional work. According to a tally kept by Article 19, a nonprofit group dedicated to the protection of journalists, 141 journalists have been murdered in the country because of their work since 2000. The tally does not include Romero, so it brings it to 142. Sad news. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we're going to meet up on Monday for River City Hash Monday, so do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum.